I'm Joel Fairbrother from Bow River Law in Calgary, Alberta, and today I'm going to be answering the question, how much severance is a dismissed employee entitled to? This is actually a more, more of a complicated question than it seems at first online if you're looking into it. In Alberta, the starting point that people usually look at is the Employment Standards Code. The Employment Standards Code is the provincial legislation that tells us how much the government says the bare minimum is. That's sort of the starting point, though. Um, and what I'm referring to there is if you've been there for less than 3 months, you get zero. If you're there for between 3 months and 2 years, you get 1 week, and so on up to 8 weeks under that legislation. But again, that's just the starting point. Most employees in Alberta are entitled to a further amount, which most people call severance, but really the correct term is reasonable notice. But we'll use severance because everyone's comfortable with that. The courts, when they're trying to determine how much severance someone's entitled to, they look at three main factors, which be your age, length of service, and character of employment. If you're over 55 or so, age becomes more and more important because it becomes more difficult for you to get reemployed in a comparable job. Your length of service, long service would be considered, say 25 years, short service, a few years. The longer, generally speaking, the longer you work somewhere, the more severance you're going to be entitled to. But it is more nuanced than that, and it does depend on the particular case, but that is the general rule. The next factor is character of employment. By character of employment, what we mean is generally how managerial is it? Did you have people reporting to you? Were you in a specialized role, a senior role, or more of an entry level role? Those things are taken into account. The higher up the chain and the more specialized the role is, or the more senior the role is, generally speaking, equals more severance, a longer reasonable notice period. So there have been many commentators say that there's a rule of thumb of 1 month per year of service. That's not really accurate. It's not a bad way to sort of start when you're looking at it, what typically employees get, but it can be dramatically more than that in some cases. And in some cases, it could be less than that. There are so many factors that can be taken into account. And the reason for that is everyone's job is a little bit different. And the courts are looking at your specific job. They're looking at what job do you lose, and generally speaking, how long do they think it's going to take you to find a reasonably comparable job? And the nuanced and unique nature of that is why I do not suggest people use online severance calculators. I mean, an online severance calculator is going to be general, usually. It's going to be you can find the general information quite easily. Those calculators are usually not going to be very accurate. If you want to determine how much severance you're entitled to, my suggestion is to speak to an employment lawyer. If your employment has been terminated, you could be entitled to quite a bit, actually. If you're going to be terminated, if you're an employer and you're going to be terminating the employment of someone, you should speak to an employment lawyer before you do that, because there may be some options to reduce your potential liabilities. There may be some options that effectively cost you less, but you're not going to know unless you speak to an employment lawyer first about the specific circumstances. If you already make the decision, once you've already made the decision, all the lawyer can do is do their best to protect you. But facts are facts. If you made the move already. So in any event, how much how much severance is a dismissed employee entitled to? Well, it really depends on the circumstances of the case. But I've given you some general thoughts of how we look at it. And just so you know, generally speaking, the most is 2 years of severance. but there are exceptions to that. And sometimes it's not the period of time that is most significant. Sometimes it is how we calculate it. So sometimes employers, when they terminate employment, they will calculate the severance to be just base salary when there's many other aspects of compensation. In some cases, they're allowed to do that. In many cases, they're not allowed to do that. So it's not only the period of time, but also how we calculate it. And my name is Joel Fairbrother from Bow River Law in Calgary, Alberta. And I hope this has been helpful.